To me, it's an interview that is done between two people that know one another very well. It's a very comfortable interview and nothing is really challenged. If the interview's set up, I think obviously one would accept there's only a few people in the world that could get that interview. For me, trying to understand the situation, I listened to an interview where very little was challenged. It was accepted at face value, nothing was pushed back on, and it was evaluated from the perspective of an admiring set of eyes sitting across the desk from him.
What would you say to that, Piers?
Well, I wasn't aware that Simon Jordan... I mean, look, apart from anything else, I was very shocked to discover yesterday that Simon had actually tweeted that he agreed with me about something. So
I agree with you about a lot of things, Piers, but that's also got to do with what I just said.
We're heading into new territory. No, I'm always happy to take interviewing technique advice from Simon.
I wasn't giving you interviewing technique advice. I was just giving you an example of what I felt the interview was. That's what I was asked.
One of the world's... No, if you let me respond, I'm always happy to take interview lectures from people, particularly those who've never interviewed people.
Not a lecture, Piers, it's an observation.
If I could just finish my sentence, I did challenge him, which is why I got him to admit he shouldn't have done what he did at Tottenham. I got him to make other admissions too. I'm not quite sure what you mean by challenging, because he was setting the record straight over stuff that had been misleading.
Well, I can give you an example if you want. I can give you examples of what I mean by challenging, because I'm not giving you a lecture. I was asked for an opinion upon how you conducted an interview.
Give Piers an example, just one example.
And an example would be if the argument about executives that didn't want him from the year before, didn't want him now, who would these executives be? Because he's, by admission, he's never spoken to the Glazers. Are we talking about Ed Woodward? Are we talking about...
Told you.
Well, no, you didn't. You told me that it's an easy supposition to make. So let me finish, because I hadn't finished. I'll let you finish. The scenario for me, sitting there looking back and looking at the interview that you did and watching it as a former football club owner, thinking, how would this situation manifest itself? Elite player has a problem with the football club, alludes to the fact that this problem starts from people not wanting him a year ago, when the whole world knew that a red carpet was rolled out for him. Who were these executives? Given the fact that Ed Woodward's no longer in the business, so was it him? Was it Richard Arnold, who allegedly has made phone calls to Ronaldo suggesting that whatever time he needs, he can have? Who were these executives? He'd never met the Glazers. He talked about the Glazers' motivation. How does he know the Glazers' motivation if he's never spoken to them?
Well, I would say to that if there are senior executives running Manchester United who wish to deny on the record anything Ronaldo has said, let them come forward.
But I don't care what you would say, Piers. I wanted to hear what he would say.
Well, he said it was senior
he didn't name
executives of
anybody.
the company.
In the same way, in the same way that you asked for Meghan Markle to name the racists in the royal family, why wouldn't you ask Ronaldo to name explicitly and specifically who he was referring to?
I think if you go back and watch the interview,
I did.
You will see that he names titles of people.
But there's no president, Piers. There's no president in the football club. There isn't a role in the football club for a president.
Should we presume, Piers, he's talking about
the people who run.
Yeah. Should we presume, Piers, he's talking about the chief executive, Richard Arnold?
I would think so, yeah.
Well, he described them separately. He described directors and the president. So a president is one thing, Piers, which isn't a role inside a football club, and I'd assume you would know that. And the other part of it is directors. So if we're going to deal in detail, let's deal in detail. Let's look at the pushback. Let's push back on the idea that someone was going to spend £350 million or euros on signing him on a contract, and where Manchester United might be in the equation, where Man United offered an opportunity to sell him.
By the way, you're talking complete nonsense about the Saudi deal as well, because I know exactly who made that deal, and I know that figure is true. So I heard you earlier saying you don't believe it. Well, you're wrong. So, we can all split hairs about it.
So you've seen a contract from the Saudis, have you?
I've actually spoken to the Saudi person who made the offer myself.
But you've seen the contract, have you?
Unless the person's
lying to me. The answer would be no then, right? So you haven't seen the contract.
Why would they lie?
Piers, I don't know, mate. Why would people misrepresent things? You do that regularly. So you had a wonderful opportunity, and only a few people in the world. And by the way, I agree with a lot of things you say, and the reason why I tweeted something about the interview you did with Emily Matlis is because I agree with a lot of things you say. I don't make puerile comments like you do about the observations about being a failed football club owner or other points you felt you needed to make on Twitter about me. But the point is that the Ten Hag scenario, where you had an opportunity, because as a former owner, I look at it and say, why in God's name would a manager that's come into a football club that publicly announced from the get-go that Ronaldo was part of his plans, why would he suddenly want to take this player down? And you never asked him once that question. You never asked him his perception of why Ten Hag would go after him that way.
If I could get can I just say, I do think you're talking complete nonsense. This interview, over 90 minutes, has made more headlines than any interview.
Yeah, but why am I talking nonsense, Piers? What's nonsense about not understanding the dynamic?
If I could just finish. It has made more headlines around the world than any sporting interview I can ever remember.
Right.
The reason it's made headline, if I could just finish.
Well, go on,
the
then.
reason it's made, if I could finish. The reason it's made so many headlines is because it was revelatory. The reason it was revelatory was because Ronaldo was the one who was correcting the record. Ronaldo was doing what I suspect some of the royal family would love to have done on the record after the Meghan and Harry wine-a-thon, where they accused the royal family of being callous racists, but they weren't allowed to. Ronaldo's not in that position.
But you slaughtered Oprah Winfrey for adopting the same style that you did.
But you're getting the chicken and the egg the wrong way round. Ronaldo is responding to all the stuff that's been in the papers and on broadcast. He is reacting to it. He's not the one precipitating this. He is the one correcting all the smears and lies about him in the last few months, of which there have been many. So my job was to facilitate him setting the record straight as he saw it. Now, if anyone at Manchester United wants to come back on the record from Richard Arnold down and deny specific allegations that Ronaldo's made against the club and the senior executives,
and that's fine, Piers, and that would be great for you. But my observation about you is that you were incredibly critical about the style of interviewing that was deployed by Oprah Winfrey in the advertorial. Hang on, I haven't finished, Piers. In the advertorial that was put forward by them, you did precisely the same thing. You sat there with goldfish eyeballs, looking across the table at someone you deeply admire, and you had no constructive objectivity.
I'm not being funny, but you yourself are now sounding very puerile and childish, because there's no comparison between the two things.
Well, there is, Piers, and there is.
We're talking about Ronaldo, or we're talking about Man United in the larger picture.
Well, they want to look at this lad, Alejandro Garnacho, and say that's
not
our
a Man
future.
United supporter will ever agree with anything I say, because I think I'm anti-United, which is tosh. In this case, I choose to believe, although we don't know the true story, I choose to believe that Ronaldo's been mistreated here. End of. That's my take on it.
Mistreated?
Yeah. I think someone's told them a tale and not kept their word.
But I can't understand why that makes any sense to you, because what would be the benefits? No, but Graeme, listen for a second. What would be the benefit of Ten Hag saying something to Ronaldo that he patently has no intention of delivering, burning whatever limited bridge he may have had with a player that clearly wanted to leave United anyway, by spinning him? What would be the purpose of that? All you're doing is moving the problem from the conversation that you allude that he has in the summer, which I don't think he had.
That's exactly what I think he's done. He's caused himself a problem.
But so the man's a simpleton. He looks at the world's greatest player, knows he has massive influence, knows there's a problem there, and compounds the problem by telling him things he doesn't intend to do, so that the problem gets even worse. So now you have a situation that's twice the problem that it could have been in the summer. What would be the logic?
But sometimes not, as you know, as you've been part of. Logic doesn't always apply in the world of professional
football. Common sense surely does.
But sometimes there's not a lot of that around either. I believe simple. We can talk about this all day. I'm choosing, because of my experience in football, both as a player and manager, and the experiences I've had in both those jobs, is that they had an agreement and the manager's not kept that agreement. And that is why it's non-stop talk about Ronaldo. That has pushed him to this point. And I have to believe that he will leave now. I think his bridges are well and truly burnt now. This is a simple case where someone has promised the player, a big player, the biggest player, something and not come through with it. And that's the reaction you're getting from the player. Simple as that.
But again, I go back to the point. I mean, and Ten Hag is not fit to manage Manchester United by that logic, because the problem he's going to have with the amount of circumstances that Ronaldo will create. All the headlines for the last 3 months have been about bloody Ronaldo, right? And not Manchester United.
They've made a mistake.
But it's not a mistake. It's absolute.
Man United supporters want us to be talking about their digging out a result yesterday at Fulham. They want to be talking about how things have improved at the football club.
Ten Hag
all we're talking about is Ronaldo.
But that's the media, Graeme, and that's how it works, right?
They have shot themselves in the foot with this.
But Graeme, that's the media, and that's how it works, right? So let's follow your logic through, insofar there is any in this conversation. You've got Ten Hag comes out in a press conference, and the first person and talks about wanting Ronaldo. So he wants him, and the backdrop is that Ronaldo wants to leave, and perhaps there's a discussion. If Ten Hag walks through the door and says to the Man United board, I don't think we should get rid of him, it's a different discussion. He wants to keep him, makes it public, has a conversation with him, tells him a pack of lies so that he can burn the relationship with him 3 months down the road, and then creates an absolute
Simon, you're forever going down the road
nuclear
of
bomb moment.
Dramatic sense. He tells him a pack of lies. If If it's one lie, one small lie, that might be enough to push Ronaldo over the edge. It's not a pack of lies. Don't exaggerate. A pack of lies. So he sat in a room with them, and they have come out of that room with an agreement in place.
So
that agreement would have been based around how much game time Ronaldo was getting.
But Graeme, nobody's bigger than the club.
Oh, listen,
so is Ronaldo bigger than the club here?
Pinky and Perky. I'm more than happy to talk about the next 2.5 hours about Ronaldo.
But that's fine.
Ronaldo has been told the tale.
Doing that.
Ronaldo has been told the tale. I just don't
understand how you can
Ronaldo has been told it. See what?
I'm looking at the messages.
No. I'm not interested. With all due respect, I'm not interested in what people are phoning in and saying about this Ronaldo situation.
They're the lifeblood of it. James Harrison, United fan. Ronaldo's the past, Ten Hag's the future. Simple. No player's bigger than the club.
I'll come back to it in 5 years' time. No one will remember Ten Hag. In 55 years' time,
we'll all remember Ronaldo for the good he's done, but now he's seriously blemished it.
So we've now moved into the territory, right, where it isn't a particularly significant thing that Ten Hag said to him. It's just not entirely keeping with every single dot and I and T. So now you're going to suggest that Ronaldo's got a justification for this behaviour.
What it isn't is what you suggested, a pack of lies.
But Graeme, people say
narrow it down. You can narrow this down quite simply to, I want to play more than you want me to play. There's been some sort of discussion, some sort of agreement around that. They've walked out the room. Ronaldo's happy to stay.
He's gone past that.
The manager's happy to keep him. Look at the manager's actions.
He's gone past
with
it.
His substitutions.
Okay, Graeme, but he's gone past that.
Graeme. Look at the manager.
Ronaldo's alleged, Graeme, that executives from the get-go didn't want him in the door.
You had 8 managers in 10 years.
Yep. And you had 5 jobs in 5 years. We can keep going around in a circle, right?
Well, I managed for 20 years and I had 8 jobs, which I'm not sure where you're getting your arithmetic.
From your profile.
Well, again, you have too much reliance on what you read in Wikipedia.
Okay, you've said that.
And we should do a show when we take our phones away and see how interesting our show is.
Okay, away you go then.
So what?
Start with it then.
This isn't a pack of lies. This is about Ronaldo having game time. About Ronaldo being on the pitch. He still thinks he's got something to offer. The manager obviously thinks he has something to offer because he persuaded him to stay. I come back to it. They've left the room with an agreement in place, and obviously now the manager has not kept his word.
But that doesn't justify an unauthorised interview with Piers Morgan, which he apparently initiated.
Unauthorised?
Of course it is. Do you think United allowed him to do it?
Well, why can't he do it on his own? Will it be in his contract?
He's under contract, probably not
to anybody.
He's what?
He can't speak to anybody.
He cannot bring the club into disrepute. You know that. You've had players under contract.
That's a different thing, but it's not an unauthorised.
Of course, it's an unauthorised interview.
I would disagree with it. I think.
Well, how can you disagree with it? You're just being argumentative now. How can you disagree with something? You're a contract. Graeme, you know contracts the same as I do.
You've got the hump because Piers Morgan got the scoop.
Yeah, I mean, I very much like Frank Lampard, and I was one of the people that felt that, to some extent, given the brief that he was given at Chelsea, it was a little bit early to have taken him out based upon the fact that they'd given him a brief based upon only having young players and just started to allow him to spend some money. Of course, Thomas Tuchel came along and put it into perspective by winning the Champions League 4 months later. I don't know what the question was at Everton. If Frank Lampard was the answer, I'm not entirely sure what the question was. They got themselves out of jail at the very last knockings at the back end of last season, and they've started this season inauspiciously again. But if you look at the Everton side and you look at the quality, and I think if we're reading the notes on this about Alex Iwobi, he's one of the few players that actually has done well for them. So if fans are throwing his shirt back at him because of his performance in an individual game, I think that's a little disappointing, because I've been very condemnatory of Alex Iwobi making observations. If I was Arsenal and someone offered me 35 million quid for him, I'd have sent him around in a cab. But he's gone and done well in recent times for Everton. So I think, despite the fact that I don't think he's a world beater, he's been an honest player for Everton. But if you look at the team out there and look at what Everton have become, with all the grandstanding of the hundreds of millions of pounds that Moshiri has spent, and, they've had Ronald Koeman in there. They've had Sam Allardyce brought in to do a job specifically to keep them in a division a couple of years ago. They pursued Marco Silva, and that didn't necessarily work out. They had Martinez for a while. And here we are with Frank Lampard. And I'm not entirely sure, looking at the squad of players, when you're signing players that Brighton don't want, and I know Brighton are a very good side, but you're taking away a perceived goal scorer in Neil Maupay. You're looking at Dwight McNeil from a relegated Burnley, and you're looking at Demarai Gray that does it in flashes and is a good player, but ultimately has had certain periods of time at each club he's been to.
Those three are the perfect example.
What are you expecting? Then you've got your centre forward on the front page of GQ holding a handbag. What do you expect to really see from a team? I know I'm being a bit flippant, but that is what Everton have become a little bit right now, and it's not something I take lightly because I'm very fond of Bill. I think it's a great football club. But I don't think they know whether they're Arthur or Martha at this moment in time, and I'm not sure Frank Lampard. I would have thought Frank Lampard in this incarnation would have been better because he didn't have, no disrespect to Jody Morris, but he had an experienced coach alongside him in Paul Clement, who is a decent number 2, not a manager, he's a decent number 2. But all of this to one side, you know, when you go up to Bournemouth, and again Graham's right to flag Bournemouth's perspective, when you go and get spanked in the Cup 4-1, and then you turn up 3 days later and you get spanked again 3-0, you're going to get some real pushback from your fans because it's not good enough. If you look down the list of people that have been given, you know, the freedom of the city, you've got Ronnie Wood from the Rolling Stones. So if you don't like his music, you would be disagreeing with him being given a freedom. You can look at John Burko, who's a ghastly little goblin. So why do you want to be in that company? Or you can look at the Fonz. The Fonz was given, Henry Winkler was given it. So it depends upon your point of view. I'm really not in the camp. I think we've lost the context of what gongs and awards were given for. And I really find them quite perplexing that they give them to people in the confines of their career still being current. You know, I think it's ludicrous. I do think it's ludicrous to watch people introduce Sir Andy Murray onto a tennis court. I do think that's silly. And I think we've lost the value of what we're awarding these things for.
Is he not just introduced as Scotland's Andy Murray?
No, I don't think they introduced him as Scotland's Andy Murray. No, of course not. Of course, only when he's losing. And then when he's winning, he's United Kingdom's Andy Murray.
Okay. So are you having it or not having it? How are you getting the freedom of the city of London?
I'm ambivalent towards it.
Right, you're neither here nor there about it. Lord Keown,
it's not keeping me awake.
This is for outstanding sporting achievement.
Yeah, well, I don't think you can argue with that, and I don't think you can argue with the way that he's
carried. Won anything?
No, I think he's been. I think you look at his achievements for England. I don't think we're looking at his club achievements, and I don't think you are anyway in any of these knighthoods or honours that you get.
Well, his club achievements not bad. I mean, third highest Premier League goal scorer of all time, 193.
But I don't see a list of trophies. But nonetheless, what I do see from an England point of view, that the semi-final, final, Golden Boot, the last World Cup. So I think he's represented his country magnificently well. So so who am I to question him being given that honour? I don't think he doesn't deserve. I think he does deserve it
as a perfect.
I'm not sure
model.
what it really means, freedom of the city, but I think it's the honour, isn't it?
Well, I think it means you can drive your livestock across London Bridge anytime you fancy, but I don't know if Harry will be up for doing that. The City of London Corporation policy says we're delighted that Harry will be awarded the freedom of the city. It's richly deserved. Harry's a superstar. For so many football fans, he has made a massive contribution to sport in London. So is he any more deserving or less deserving than Jurgen Klopp, who was awarded the freedom of the city of Liverpool?
Well, Klopp certainly deserved that because of what he's achieved at the football club. They hadn't won a Premier League for 30 years, so I don't think you can argue with Klopp. He's got to successive Champions League finals. He's put that together. I do feel, and I think maybe Simon's got this view as well, that these awards should come when people have finished, Jim. It's a bit like you in your world, where do you stand in the broadcasting world?
Good question.
Is it going to be Sir?
Inevitably, yes.
Please.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you promised us that, would you step down if you actually gave you that honour?
Or is that the deal?
Because it would be difficult if you were being announced every time as Sir, wouldn't it?
Oh no, I'd love that. Good morning. It's Sir Jim White and Simon Jordan live on talkSPORT. Yeah, that's got a ring to it, hasn't it?
No, it doesn't have a ring to it. But the point of this is, you wonder and look at it and think, who's getting the main benefit of association from these things? Is it those people that actually award the things by getting people like Harry Kane that drive attention to what the award itself, or is it the person that's a recipient of it? Because you look at it and say Harry Kane is a subject matter of being the England captain going into the World Cup tournament. If you're looking at the body of work, yes, he's an outstanding player, but
perfect role model, isn't it?
Well, it depends what you think role models are, and depends what you think they should be, and depends if people want footballers to be role model. If I'm a businessman, I'm not looking at Harry Kane as a role model, am I? If I'm a young footballer that's 12 years of age and looking at footballers, I think he might well be someone I want to emulate.
He's a role model in that 193 goals for Tottenham in the Premier League, no red cards, not one.
No, it's a timely recognition of what he's achieved in the game, Jim. Just before we go to a World Cup,
there you go.
I don't see there's a problem with us embracing our stars in this.
Does it need? When did they become stars rather than athletes? I query these things sometimes. But is it a societal recognition that they need when really and truly they are just operating within their sphere? Footballers play primarily for themselves. I spend my entire life being told by footballers that during the time of their career that they're very selfish, and when they come out of their industry, because they have to be, because they have to look after themselves. Do we look at societal awards and say, well, sports people are particularly deserving of them? I'm not suggesting that they're not. I'm playing devil's advocate. And I look at it and say, well, I understand the situation. When the England team won the World Cup, it was probably fitting that those players got gonged.
They didn't. 66?
Well, a lot of them did over a period of time.
1990.
Because I think society's expectation of what a gong represented has changed and 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 changed. So now they're handing out like confetti, so they even have less value than they once did before. But you look at this situation and say, well, you haven't actually won anything. Third in the Premier League all goal scoring record is third. And, you know, if we're going to reward people for being third, you're playing for a side that's
but given time, he'll eclipse it.
And it's fantastic. And when he does, and if we think a sporting achievement of scoring X amount of goals in the Premier League is worthy of a societal award.
He's England captain.
Well, it's freedom of the city. It's not a knighthood, is it?
If he lifts you the World Cup in Qatar,
but it's a societal award,
isn't it?
Now, we also do know that Harry does do other things like get involved with charities and get involved with societal things, and actually gives back by sponsoring shirts for football clubs that he once used to play for. Yeah. So you do see certain sides of his character that are more compelling. So,
the freedom of the City of London, does he deserve it? No red cards, 193 goals. He is an absolute role model.
By what standard? By the
outstanding sporting achievement.
Okay, well, let me give you the standard I would judge it by the awarding of it to Disraeli or the awarding of it to Winston Churchill. I would give it by that standard.
How many goals did they score?
But they led the country in very difficult times, and I would say that was an award that was well merited. Now we've diluted the award of merit and the meritocracy of what we give awards for, and so by today's standards, which are very low and very nominal, yes, of course. And in fact, he should be given, a peership on the basis of
you are just seething. You hadn't had a sniff of an OBE.
Who is Simon though to be so righteous and virtuous about who is to be given that?
On you
or
go,
bestowed
on you
that
go.
particular honour.
Let's be fair.
Okay. Let's be fair. Because
what's righteous and virtuous about that?
Well, I think if you think about the bums on seats he's done, the people who come to watch him play, some people just turn up to watch Harry Kane.
Great point.
Do they?
Yeah, they do. The people of the City of London go to watch him and they cherish him as a player. And I think it's a chance to embrace that. And
so what about the Chelsea fans?
I think he's conducted himself
quite.
The
England fans?
I think and he's not asking for this award, Simon. He hasn't actually put his hand and said, give me that, please.
Yep.
He's just basically.
But what's righteous and virtuous about saying the standards of these awards were once given to prime ministers that took us through war times, and now we're giving it to footballers?
Well, I wouldn't want to sit.
Of the City of London.
Yes.
All right.
I wouldn't want to sit in judgment.
But the same standard,
panels.
we give it to John Bercow. So, would you want to be in that crowd? I wouldn't necessarily.